Welcome to Moving People Forward with Mark Elfstrand. This program is a series of conversations on commonly seen challenges in everyday people's lives. We hope you'll be inspired by the stories you hear today. Perhaps you know of someone who would also benefit. Be sure to share the program link with a friend. Now, here's Mark.
52 cups of coffee could actually put you into, caffeine overdrive. Or you just might find a book about 52 cups of coffee, a great resource for your devotional life. You know, we do live in a very noisy world with voices asking for our attention all the time. But are we missing the voice that matters most in life? Today you're going to hear from a young woman who has taken her adventures to various lands to give us a better perspective with the sounds of hope. With me today on Moving People Forward is Natalie Brown, somewhat of a world traveler, a blogger, and the author of the book 52 Cups of Coffee. Natalie, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let me first ask you about the world traveling. Really? How did you get to do that at such a young age?
It started off with my dad. You know, he travels through his ministry, and then he started bringing my family and I along with him. So I think when I was 7 years old, I went with him to Japan, and that's when all of this started. And so it's just continued since.
How did you feel that life kind of was shaped in some way by just being able to experience other cultures?
I think for me, a big thing was just getting to experience the church and other cultures. And so through my travels, I really got an expanded view of God and got to see, wow, you know, God is so much bigger than just my experiences or what I know of him in America. He's all around the world, and other people are worshiping and serving him in so many amazing ways.
Well, they are, but on the other hand, you're a person that is a follower of Jesus. But in other lands, you find all kinds of different approaches to connecting with God. How did you process that?
I think for me, it showed me, first of all, the privilege that I had of being a follower of Jesus here in the U.S., where I didn't have to fear my faith or fear my religion. But it also gave me an appreciation for those who were in countries where they did have to fear their faith. And so getting to see people live for Jesus even when the cost was very great was really inspiring for me and very challenging for me to be more intentional with my own walk with the Lord.
Now, you do blogging, is that correct?
I do.
How often?
So I started doing it once a week.
Yes.
I've recently taken a break just to kind of re-spark some of that creativity and get more juices flowing. But starting in the new year, it will begin once a week again.
So when did you start writing creatively? At what age?
I'd say in high school. I started a blog when I was in high school. It's called Naturally Natalie, and I didn't really tell many people about it because I was nervous. And then I took a break and I started again in college, and it was my junior year of college, so when I was 21, that I started sending out weekly emails. And for me, it was a way to process how God was showing up in my life, how he was showing up in the world around me, and inspire and encourage other people to do the same thing.
Well, obviously feedback must have been important along the way as well.
Definitely.
People like what you've written and respond to that. So here's the book that you've come out with, 52 Cups of Coffee, and by Natalie Brown. Obviously you must be a coffee aficionado?
Oh yes, I love a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, and do you have a preference as to where you get that coffee?
For me, so I have criteria when it comes to coffee shops.
Okay, now one of these, you're a coffee snob. Oh no, okay.
Yes. So here's what makes a good coffee shop for me.
Yeah.
One, aesthetics. I love a place that has good aesthetics, a place where you feel just calm and invited. 2, you need to have outlets. There needs to be a lot of outlets. And then 3, you need to have good baked goods. So it's not so much for me the coffee, that's important, but it's more the experience I get drinking the coffee.
Okay, but do you drink just plain old coffee like I do? I'm a black coffee drinker. Or are you a little more sophisticated than that?
I'll say a little more sophisticated. I like to have some cream and sugar in there. I love a good latte. Vanilla lattes, dirty chais, which is chai latte with espresso.
It just doesn't sound appetizing, a dirty chai.
I know, the name is not the best.
Right.
But
All right, so obviously the theme of the book, 52 Cups of Coffee, is somehow centered around coffee, and yet it's a devotional. Make that connection for us.
Yes. So for me, I began to notice that a lot of my most transformative conversations in college happened in coffee shops.
Oh.
So kind of like I was saying, for me, it's about the experience. I found that the conversations I had with others, the conversations that I had with God, often centered around having just a cup of coffee in my hand, in my journal, or just another person with me.
I saw a little poster that said, "Coffee is best when shared with a friend."
Amen.
So that makes sense to you then?
Yes,
huh?
it makes so much sense to me. One, just in community, but also with God. I think that we can have such intimate moments where we just sit down and have a cup of coffee with the Lord. But some people are like, I don't like coffee. Can I still read the book? And I'm like, absolutely. For me, this book is about inviting God into something that's special for you. For me, that's a cup of coffee. For you, it might be tea or going for a walk. This is just a weekly invitation to find God in your daily life.
Okay, so if you were going to do a sequel to 52 Cups of Coffee, would it be 52 different pastries that I've come to really like
We
at
could
coffee
do
shops?
that,
Yeah,
yes.
something like that.
Yeah, maybe 12 cups of tea or something.
Right. Are you a tea drinker as well?
I am a tea drinker.
Okay, but
Yes.
coffee is your kind of your first go-to drink
It wakes me up, you know. You can't go wrong with coffee.
No. Okay, so let's kind of walk through a few of the stories. You've chosen that as a title, but wait a minute. A devotional has got 52. You got to do kind of like one a week.
Yes.
That's not a lot of devotional time. So how do you make up for that?
Yeah, so for me, it was having it be weekly was intentional. So
Okay.
I wanted it to be something that people could meditate on throughout the week. I love a good daily devotional, but rather than it being something where every day it's kind of like something you need to check off your list, I wanted this to be an invitation that each reader could have with God, inviting him into their weekly practice and saying, Lord, can we talk about this throughout the week? Can we walk this out this week? And so for me, it's just a chance to meditate on the words, not necessarily just consume them, but contemplate them.
Okay, so one of the responsibilities that somebody writing devotionals has is that you're bringing spiritual insight into the life of somebody else, which means you better, well, put it frankly, you better have your own act together spiritually.
Yeah.
So do you feel an extra kind of a responsibility or weight when it comes to that?
Definitely, especially during the writing process and then post the writing process as well. For me, it's a challenge and a good encouragement for myself to say, okay, Natalie, if you're going to encourage other people
Right.
to have their walk with the Lord, if you're going to share stories about God and your time in the Word, you need to make sure you're doing those things yourself. So, you know, I've always wanted to have that type of relationship with God anyways, just being in community and relationship with Him. But there is definitely an added challenge now that I've written a devotional book to keep that in line myself.
In the coffee shops where you go to, do you ever, bring this along and say, oh, I just want you to know that I've got this devotional, and they may have seen you writing or working on it
Yeah,
in a coffee
sometimes
shop?
I do. Yeah. Sometimes I read it myself. One of my prayers as I was working on this was, Lord, help this to be a resource that I can use in my own spiritual life.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really big blessing for me, is I feel the Holy Spirit speak to me through this book as well. And so it's translated past it being my own words, and it's gotten into what is the Lord saying through this book.
Well, you see, I ask you that question because I would never take this up and say, yeah, by the way, this is my devotional, because the next time my coffee wasn't right and I went, my coffee isn't right,
Hold you accountable.
then yeah, exactly. Now you got to live up to all this stuff
Yup.
that you've written about.
It's true.
Well, this is fun. Again, the 52 Cups of Coffee is the title of the book by Natalie Brown. We're going to be taking a short break, and then we're going to continue our discussion with Natalie. Again, she is a world traveler to some degree and a blogger and the author of this wonderful book. I imagine it's available online, is it?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon or at natalieabrown.com.
Natalie A. Brown, and that's
Yes.
important, by the way, in this,
It is.
natalieabrown.com. All right, we're going to
Yes.
take this time out. We'll have more of Moving People Forward in just a moment.
God is our safe place and our strength. He is always our help when we are in trouble. This word of God in Psalm 46:1 says it all. God is our safe place. He is our strength. He is our help when we are in trouble. Whenever and wherever we are invited, nationally or internationally, Lutheran Church Charity's mission is to bring the mercy, compassion, presence, and proclamation of Jesus Christ to those who are suffering and in need. LCC is a ministry of presence, to be present with Jesus, to lift up people in times of joy and sorrow, in prayer, and by passing through donations of dollar per dollar to those in need. Through our canine ministries, we respond and deploy with boots on the ground and paws within 24 hours, often sooner, of any crisis or disaster situation we're invited into. You see, for us, the bottom line is making a difference by being present. For people who are suffering and in need with that mercy, compassion, presence of Jesus Christ. Thank you again for allowing us the privilege to stand alongside and serve others. Jesus and your partnership make that possible to touch thousands of lives.
This is Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand, and we're discussing today how to refine our life listening to tune in more effectively to the only voice that really matters. And with me today is Natalie Brown, the author of the book 52 Cups of Coffee. All right, well, we know this is a weekly devotional. Now, I have to tell you that I was watching a comedy show recently, and the people who produced it said, we're going to be showing you a series of these that are the 10 best. Right? Okay, well, I blog myself, and I'm on blog 330 now, I believe.
Wow.
But I have certain ones that I say, these are among my favorites. Mm-hmm. Is that your situation here as well?
I do have a few favorites,
yeah.
Yes.
Well, tell me about a couple of those.
Okay, so one that comes to mind is called Out of the Boat. And for me, it has a lot of meaning because I base it off of what I think has become my life passage, which is Matthew 14. And it's, the story of Peter calling out to Jesus, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come. And Jesus says, come. And for me, I love this story because we get to witness Peter's faith and also his doubt right in the same moment. But even in the midst of that, we witness how constant God is. And even when we doubt, even when we fear, he's right there reaching out a hand to grab us as we're out at sea. And so for me, this becomes this metaphor of how is God calling us to get out of the boat? What are the places of safety that we're in where God's like, you can trust me to step out and I'm going to hold you no matter what happens. And so I love that chapter because it's an encouragement for myself, but also an encouragement for each reader. God is for you, and because of that, you can step out of your own realm of safety and trust him.
So how did that apply in your own personal life?
Yeah, I wrote that chapter while I was studying abroad in South Africa. And it was, a new environment, a new context. There was so much going on where I was like, okay, Lord, I need you to show up for me in this way. And I was reminded of the song Oceans by Hillsong, where it's like, Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. And I remember I used to sing that song and love it. And then one day I was like, whoa, do I realize what I'm actually singing? I'm asking God to bring me to a place of instability so that I find my stability in him. And while I was, in this entirely new country, that became even more real to me. Even when I'm out at sea, even when I'm in an uncomfortable situation, God's sovereignty will be the thing that carries me. That's where I'll find my safety.
Tell me another one of your favorites.
Another one of my favorites is the first chapter of the book, which is called Exhale. Yep. And I love that chapter because I actually recall one of my embarrassing moments from high school. And it's this experience where I was running a track meet. I was the anchor for the 4x4. And during the race, I fell flat on my face. And for so long, it was this moment of tension for me. I was so embarrassed. I had disqualified my team. I was so ashamed. And later on, actually, as I was working on this book, God just really began to speak to me about that experience and how in my striving, I had forgotten the principles of what it means to run well. And he began to invite me to see that sometimes I do that in my spiritual life as well. I get so focused on running for God and I need to get this done that I forget the daily discipline of simply walking with the Lord, and how learning to walk well leads us to run well. And so for me, it was really special how God took this moment that used to bring me so much shame and then used it as a way to not only encourage me, but encourage every reader that picks up this book.
Well, but you brought up something that's important here, that even when you're writing devotionals, you can talk about other people's embarrassing moments, but actually giving revelation of your own embarrassing moments brings transparency into the equation. And for an author, that's probably a pretty important thing as well, is it not?
I would completely agree. I think for me, it's one of the sacred parts of writing. I've found that in my life, I tend to be a pretty private person. I love to talk about you all day long, but if you talk about me, I'm like, oh, I'm okay, I'm good. But with writing, it really forces me to confront some of my stories and be open and honest and vulnerable. But not just to stay there, but to say, okay, this is how I'm finding God in this as well. Yeah. And I think a lot of transformation happens when we do that.
You're probably very much aware that depression, anxiety, and suicide are major problems in our nation, right? And I'm sure there's multiple causes behind this, but I often make reference to, a hope meter. When your hope meter gets flat, look out.
Yeah.
And hope is a pretty important theme for you in your book as well, isn't it?
Definitely. For me, it's so important because I agree. The statistics that we are seeing today, it's really heartbreaking. And I think that there's so many solutions. One is, getting checked out, getting help. But also the hope meter is correct, taking that time to find the hope. And my dad and I were just talking about this recently, and he was saying, when someone is lost at sea, the moment that they see light, hope begins to arise in them. And I was so struck by this statement because I think it's true in our own lives. Sometimes we go through experiences where everything seems really dark. And I think in those moments we need to be intentional about finding the light, even if it's just a glimmer, holding on to that and saying, okay, I can keep going. Help is on the way.
52 Cups of Coffee by Natalie Brown. That's what we're talking about here. All right, so you are in the millennial class. How do you think you have an ability here to connect with millennials?
Well, I think being one right now, my mind is kind of in the same realm as them. And I think something you see with millennials is we're asking a lot of questions, we're challenging the norm, we're trying to figure things out. And so going back to being honest about my own journey, I think is a great place to start. Just being honest about the questions I've asked, the things that I've had to challenge, the ways that I'm exploring faith in God for myself, and not coming down on our generation for doing those things, but also being transparent about how I found God in those things. And so making sure he's always at the forefront of the conversation for me has been huge.
Now that you have written this, and you've got your theme down, and you kind of, do you see a sequel coming out of a book like this?
I would love to see a sequel. I don't know if it'll necessarily be another weekly devotional, but I definitely have some writing in the works for another project that focuses more on God's grace. So I think a big theme throughout this book is the idea of hope, and I would love for my next book the idea to be grace and finding God's grace in our everyday moments.
Well, it seems like you bring to the table a lot of poise and experience and spiritual wisdom. I mean, just, in meeting you now a couple of times and talking like this. And you would also be have significant opportunities of influence with teen girls, I would think, even preteen girls who are going through struggles. Do you have any of those opportunities?
I do. The Lord is really beginning to open some doors for that, which has been a really big blessing. I think for me, that is one of the areas where my heart reaches out a lot, because I see myself in those girls, and I also see the people I believe God wants to lead us to become. So every time I'm given the opportunity to speak, especially to young women, I consider it such an honor and a privilege.
So actually, you could see yourself on the Natalie Brown speaking tour in days to come.
I would love that.
Yeah, right.
Which is funny, because if you had told my younger self that at 13, 15, even 19 years old, I would have completely run away from that. But God has really led me on a journey with just confidence in that. So Who knows what the future holds?
Well, one of my favorite verses is kind of, I'm a little hesitant to call things life verses, but is Psalm 138:8, and it starts out, "The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me." And it sounds like, it takes a while to discover what that is sometimes and
So
kind of
true.
move through that. But it sounds like you're on that path as well, and recognizing that God has given you some unique skills, gifts, and opportunities at present as well. So again, 52 Cups of Coffee is available on Amazon, I believe, right?
Yes, it is.
And the way they find that is to look for Natalie A. Brown, because there is another 52. I checked this out.
Yes, there is.
So you want to make sure it's Natalie A. Brown when you are checking this out.
Yes.
And you can find it there and be inspired and hopefully encourage Natalie to do more of what she
Amen.
loves doing. Keep blogging,
Thank
keep
you.
writing, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And so good to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah.
been a blessing.
And your website again is?
NatalieABrown.com.
Okay, very good. And that's going to do it for our program today. As the sages have told us, grow in wisdom. Think humbly of yourself. And of course, love one another. May it be so with you. Join me next time for more of Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand. Woof!